ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Be Great Podcast, episode 58. On today's episode, we are talking transfer portal. We pretty much have all the teams ready to go for the most part. And we're going to look kind of at how rosters look now, how the transfer portal went. I'll discuss some things specific to the spring transfer portal, but mostly it's just going to be transfer portal in totality. Before I get to that, though, I will say the number one quarterback for the 2026 high school recruiting class recently committed. I think was it yesterday? What's the day? May 7th? Yeah, yesterday committed to, actually, I'm not going to lie. I don't remember if it was yesterday or was it Monday? It might have been Monday. Doesn't matter. Jared Curtis committed to the University of Georgia. It was between Georgia and Oregon. And thank goodness he chose Georgia for the sake of my mental health. And, Georgia got up into the top 10 as far as recruiting classes, and they have the potential to really make a mark. I know they are, I think, the favorites to land the number one overall player, number one offensive tackle, Jackson Cantwell, who commits next week, I think. I know they're leading for number one linebacker, Tyler Atkinson. I know they're in contention for Mark Bowman. I think he's the number one tight end. So they're in contention for a lot of great players, and we'll just kind of have to see where they land. But let's get to the transfer portal. So first, I'll talk about a few things that happened with the spring portal. Okay, I'm not going to talk about everything. I'm not going to talk about every team. I'm just going to talk about a few things that I found interesting and that I liked. First and foremost, Jaden Ott to Oklahoma, I think, is a great addition for the Sooners. I've always loved Jaden Ott. I think he's a tremendous running back out of Cal. And Oklahoma got a good one, for sure. Oklahoma got a good one. He's going to do really well, in my opinion, in the SEC, as long as that offensive line blocks well for him. And it's just another piece that Venables is adding. They added a really good quarterback with a lot of potential, and now they've added a running back to go alongside him, and I think there's potential there. Georgia added 3 in one day. Really, the two I mainly want to talk about, though, are Ella Madozie, linebacker out of Army, and Josh McCray, running back out of Illinois. Josh McCray is going to be the Thunder to Nate Frazier's Lightning. Josh McCray is one of those where if it's 4th and 1, you need a yard, Josh McCray is getting put out there because he's not going to go down on the first tackle attempt. That's not who he is. He's going to run through you, not around you. And Ella Madozie, he's a guy where he's a linebacker, but we're going to play him probably at outside linebacker at that edge position, have him rush the passer. Excuse me. And that's something that Georgia needed with Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins going into the draft and Damon Wilson transferring to Missouri. We needed another guy at that position, and I think Ella Madozie is the perfect addition. And then Ohio State got, oh my gosh, his first name is Bo. I think his last name is like Atkinson, something like that. An edge rusher out of North Carolina. He's very Jack Sawyer-y, so it makes sense for Ohio State to want a guy like that. I know Georgia was in contention. There were a lot of people who wanted him, and Ohio State ended up getting him, and he's probably somebody that they needed, a veteran piece to that young defense that they're going to have out there because a lot of them left for the NFL draft. So that's just briefly kind of where and obviously the big story of this spring portal was Nico going to UCLA, which I talked about already, how idiotic that was, how much of a clown show it was. And then in return, Tennessee got Joey Aguilar from UCLA. I mean, it was basically a trade. I think Joey Aguilar has potential at Tennessee. I think he throws too many interceptions. I don't think he's necessarily going to be ready for the level of play in the SEC, but I think Tennessee did the best that they could given the circumstances. And Nico at UCLA is going to be an abject disaster. UCLA. I don't even know if they make a bowl game. I don't know. Like, if you look at the Big Ten, what is a team that you could honestly sit there and say, yeah, I think UCLA will beat them? Probably Northwestern, Purdue, and that's probably it. I don't think they could beat Rutgers. I don't think they could beat Illinois. I just don't see UCLA making a bowl game. I really don't. And maybe Nico is what puts them over the top to the point where they win 6 or 7 games. I don't know, but I just don't see it. I think it's idiotic. But, it is what it is. And look, as far as looking at the transfer portal uh, as a whole, I think I should just go over the teams that I believe did well in the transfer portal. I think that's where we should start. And that, look, there's some obvious ones, right? I think we should start. Let's start with Texas Tech. Texas Tech is a team who went really hard in the transfer portal and NIL this offseason. They're a team who wants to get better, who wants to start competing at a high level. And look, they made a lot of moves to do that. They did. They got the edge rusher David Bailey from Stanford, who's a really good player. They got a massive defensive tackle, 6'5", 292 pounds, Lee Hunter from UCF. They got the edge rusher from Georgia Tech, Romello Height, who's a really good player. They got Micah Hudson back, ironically. He was at Texas Tech, transferred to Texas A&M, and now is back at Texas Tech. So who knows what's going on with Micah Hudson. Bryce Pollock, corner from Mississippi State, good player for sure. Let's see if there's anyone else I want to mention. I love the name Cash Cleveland, interior offensive lineman transferring from Colorado. But honestly, Texas Tech, they just got so many guys out of the transfer portal. So, I mean, how many is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 guys from the transfer portal. That's a lot. But it shows that they want to be better, and no doubt in my mind, Texas Tech will 100% be a contender as far as winning the Big 12 and making the playoff next season. Are they a contender in terms of winning the national championship? No. But they're on the right track, at least, to getting better and better, and that's good to see. The next team I've mentioned 1,000 times, and I'll mention here again, LSU. I love what LSU did in the transfer portal. Texas Tech got more players than them in the portal, but I think LSU got better players overall. And it's mainly let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's mainly these top 7 that LSU got that I think are just fantastic additions to this team. So let's go down the list real quick. Barian Brown. He is a speedy wide receiver that LSU could really use. And that, because you got to give Garrett Nussmeier a weapon. You don't have Neighbors anymore. You don't have Kyron Lacey anymore. Rest in peace. So Barian Brown's addition is a really good addition, as well as Nick Anderson, another wide receiver. And what I love is they're two different kinds of receivers. Nick Anderson's on the taller side, while Barian Brown's about 6 foot, 6'1". And Nick Anderson's going to be your bigger body type of guy. And so I think you did a good job at getting two really good receivers who also give you something different. Edge rusher Patrick Payton, I think, is a really good addition. He was rotting away on Florida State, on a terrible Florida State team last year. And he can be an immediate help to that defense as an edge rusher. Josh Thompson, interior offensive lineman from Northwestern. All you have to tell me is it's an interior offensive lineman, or honestly just an offensive lineman in general from Northwestern, and it's probably going to be a good addition. I mean, Northwestern for some reason just churns out behemoths on the offensive line. But he's going to come in being an immediate starter. AJ Halsey, safety out of Houston, which they actually just got recently. I think he committed this week, or I think it was this week, maybe last week. He's going to be a good addition. The safety room definitely needed help, and he will be a really good addition to that room. He'll start. Braylon Moore, another interior offensive lineman out of Virginia Tech. Again, he's going to be a guy who comes in and he's going to start. This offensive line, I think, is a question mark because of how much they lost. But you bring in two experienced players on the interior, and it makes me feel a little bit better about it. And then I've talked about this guy glowingly a lot, Mansour Delane. LSU's defensive back room needed help. You brought in help with AJ Halsey. You brought in help with Mansour Delane, and that's going to be immediate upgrades. Mansour Delane is a very good corner. Very good corner. I continue to say he would have went in probably about round 3 or 4 of the NFL draft if he would have came out this year. That's what LSU needs. Okay? He's not elite, but he is good. And that's what LSU needs right now in that defensive back room because it's been horrible the past 2 seasons. Now, outside of that top 7, I love the addition of Jack Pyburn. I think him and Patrick Payton could be really good. Just immediate is such a big increase to that edge room for me. Jack Pyburn and Patrick Payton, such a big increase. Bauer Sharp at tight end. You lost Mason Taylor. You needed someone to come in and fill that hole, and you got Bauer Sharp, who was Oklahoma's leading receiver last season. So that's a great addition. Jakeem Jackson, a young corner from Florida who played a little bit. I don't know if he'll start for LSU, but even if he doesn't, he's a really good depth piece. Bernard Gooden from USF, defensive tackle. Don't know much about him personally, but I mean, they have on 3 has him ranked above Bauer Sharp, above Jack Pyburn. So I have to imagine that's a good addition again to the defensive line. Another safety, Tamarcus Cooley, who's only a redshirt freshman from NC State. Again, you want to add to that safety room. You need to make that safety room better. You need to make the whole defensive back room better. And you've done that. Mansour Delane, or was it AJ? Yeah, AJ Halsey, Jakeem Jackson, Tamarcus Cooley. That will help a lot. And I mentioned this when it happened, Michael Van Buren, the quarterback from Mississippi State, adding him as the backup quarterback, because he will be the backup to Garrett Nussmeier, I think is great. Michael Van Buren at Mississippi State last season showed flashes. Michael Van Buren on a terrible Mississippi State team played really well against Georgia last season. Really well. He kept them in that game for as long as he could. I think he is a great addition to this quarterback room. And then they added some depth pieces towards the end here. You know, Jamari Butler, an edge out of Nebraska. I could see him getting some play time. Donovan Green, he'll be probably a backup third string tight end. Sadir Mitchell, defensive tackle out of Texas. Destin Hill, he's a depth piece at wide receiver out of Florida State. And then they added a punter, Grant Chadwick out of Middle Tennessee. So I love the additions that LSU made. Let's see, what should be the next team that I talk about? Ooh, I know exactly who it's going to be. We're going to go and we're going to talk about Auburn. Sorry, my computer was freaking out there for a second. I don't know what was happening. But yeah, we're going to go to Auburn. Let me pull them up real quick, just to give myself a reminder. Look, the best addition Auburn had was obviously Eric Singleton Jr., wide receiver out of Georgia Tech. He played really well for Georgia Tech last season. Georgia's defense struggled with him, and Auburn has made really nice additions to that wide receiver room. He can go right along there with Cam Coleman. Jackson Arnold. Look, Auburn will go as far as the quarterback will take them. And so they look. I think Jackson Arnold's an improvement to Peyton Thorne. It's just a matter of how much of an improvement, Xavier Chaplin, tackle out of Virginia Tech. I will never say no to adding a player on an offensive line because offensive line is so important. Other than a quarterback, offensive line is probably the next important thing. They had a corner out of Miami of Ohio, Rayon Strader. Horatio Fields, I've heard good things about out of Wake Forest. So that another nice addition to that wide receiver room. And Auburn's another team, by the way, who added a lot. They added a lot of guys. They even added a punter and a kicker. I did like that they added Ashton Daniels and Tanner Bailey, two other quarterbacks. So they added 3 quarterbacks to this wide receiver room, along with Deuce Knight, who came in, which Deuce Knight's not going to play. He's not ready yet. But I think having you have Jackson Arnold in there. I like Ashton Daniels out of Stanford. I don't know much about Tanner Bailey from South Carolina, but I would assume they like him since he's there. Let's see what else. They added 2 linebackers, Caleb Wheatland out of Maryland and Xavier Atkins out of LSU. I think Auburn's defense is going to be really solid this upcoming season. It's just a matter of can their offense produce and do more than it did last season. Another team that did well and typically does well a lot with these types of things is Oregon. If I had to rank my top 3 favorite transfer portal classes, I'd probably have LSU 1, Oregon 2, Texas Tech 3. What I love about Oregon, I think these top 3 are fantastic. I think they're elite. I think all 3 of them could be first round draft picks. 100%. Isaiah World, the tackle out of Nevada. I can't say enough about this guy. He is a beast. 6'8", 270. He is a monster. He is a mover of men. And I'm telling you now, he is going to shine. He's going to be a first-round draft pick in the 2026 NFL draft in Pittsburgh. Guaranteeing it right now. Dylan Thieneman out of Purdue, safety. Elite. Could also be a first-round draft pick. Mekhi Hughes, running back out of Tulane. He won't be a draft pick because he's only a redshirt sophomore. But when the time comes, although actually I think he can come out this because he'll be a junior by then. Whatever. Doesn't matter. Mekhi Hughes, whenever he does come out, I don't know if he'll be a first-round draft pick because he's a running back, but he could be. Again, out of Tulane, Mekhi Hughes, I think he's elite. And then you look at everything else. Emmanuel Pregnon, interior offensive lineman out of USC. Oregon needed to get a few offensive line guys out of the transfer portal because they lost Josh Connolly Jr. They lost to Johnny Cornelius. I feel like there's also someone else I'm missing. That might be the only 2, but I feel like there's someone I'm missing. So him and Alex Harkey, offensive tackle out of, Texas State. Yes, Texas State. Those 2 additions were really needed for this Oregon team, along with Isaiah World, as I said already. Theron Johnson, corner at Northwestern. This defense needs some help. Ohio State absolutely annihilated it last season, and so there's no doubt that this defense needs some help, along with getting Bear Alexander, defensive tackle out of USC, along with getting Jaden Kennedy, safety out of Ole Miss. They also add some wide receiver depth. They got Malik Benson out of Florida State. They got Jamari Johnson, who's a tight end out of Louisville. I like what Oregon did. I think these top 3 are just so elite. But I think Oregon's another team who we're going to need to see how the quarterback play is. And I feel like that's a common theme this season. Look at the top teams. Don't you feel like they're all bringing in new quarterbacks? Right? Ohio State, new quarterback. Texas, new quarterback. Georgia, technically a new quarterback, although he played in a playoff game, but he's a new quarterback. For the sake of this, we'll just say Georgia has a new quarterback. Oregon, new quarterback. Alabama, new quarterback. Who else? The only top teams that aren't bringing in a new quarterback are LSU, Clemson, and Penn State. Because I don't consider South Carolina a top team. I don't consider Florida a top team. There's another team. Oh, Ole Miss. Ole Miss is bringing in a new quarterback, which ironically is where I want to go next. Because I really thought Ole Miss did a good job. They brought in they had Princely Umanmielen, and they brought in his brother Prince Will, Nebraska edge rusher. They brought in Luke Haas, tight end out of Arkansas that I really like. Deshaun Womack, an edge out of Ole Miss, out of LSU. Dejon Stribling, a really solid wide receiver out of Oklahoma State. Patrick Kutas, interior offensive lineman out of Arkansas as well. And I think overall, they also got Caleb Odom, a wide receiver out of Alabama, who I think has a lot of potential. But Ole Miss is another one who got just a ton of players out of the transfer portal, and which they do every year. That's kind of their thing. I think Ole Miss takes a step back next season. I don't think they're going to be anywhere near as good as they were last season. That's just my feeling on it. Let's see. Where would I like to go next? I think Ohio State did a fine job. Nothing necessarily special, but I think it was a solid job, which teams like Texas, Georgia, Ohio State, they don't have to, hit the transfer portal out of the park. They just need to fill necessary holes. And that's what Ohio State did. They're bringing in Max Clare, a really good tight end out of Purdue. My bad. They're bringing in Bo Atkinson, who I mentioned earlier, out of North Carolina. They're bringing in C.J. Donaldson, a running back out of West Virginia. They just lost 2 running backs, so that makes all the sense in the world. They're bringing in an offensive tackle in Ethan Onyanwa. But again, it's not a big class, but it doesn't need to be when you're a team like Ohio State. Just like if you're a team like my team, Georgia. As a Georgia fan, I think we did a really good job at addressing needs and filling those needs. We recognized that wide receiver is something that needs to be fixed, and it needs to be fixed now. So what do? We go out, we get Zachariah Branch, we get Noah Thomas. 2 very different types of wide receivers that we needed. And now our wide receiver room 100% is better next year than it was this past season. That is a fact. Zachariah Branch is better than any receiver we had last season. Okay? And Noah Thomas might be as well. I already talked about Ella Mendoza. We needed to bring in a solid outside linebacker. We needed safety help because we lost not necessarily help, but we needed depth at the safety position. We lost not KJ Bolden. Gosh, I'm getting my people mixed up. I can't even talk. We lost Dan Jackson. We lost Malachi Starks. So we bring in 3 safeties. We brought in Jaden Harris out of Miami, who's a depth guy. He's not going to play this upcoming season. Zion Branch, Zachariah's brother out of USC, who I've heard a lot of great things about, actually. And Adrian Maddox out of UAB, who I think has a lot of potential. I've talked about Josh McCray. Joshua Horton was the other transfer we got recently in the spring portal, defensive tackle, really young defensive tackle out of Miami. He's more of a guy he's going to need to develop. We also brought in Micah Bell, wide receiver, running backs, kind of hybrid, out of Vanderbilt, who is Dylan Bell's brother. And we also we got Walt Claire Flynn Jr. an interior offensive lineman, a freshman out of UFC. Goodness, I cannot talk. UCF. And again, he's more of a developmental piece. But again, I think Georgia did a good job at addressing needs, especially with the higher guys that we got in the transfer portal. I think that is where I'm going to stop today. I think that covers a lot of overall transfer portal stuff. Next week is when I want to start getting into some previewing the upcoming season. Okay. I'm not sure exactly how I want to do it yet. I'm not going to go team by team and, just analyze their roster. Although I guess I could. Maybe I'll consider that, but I doubt that's what I'll do. I'll probably go maybe because we're still going to do one episode a week for now. Maybe I'll do half of a conference next week, half of a conference the next, so on and so forth. But we'll see how I want to do things. I'll tell you when we get to it next week, when we get to that episode 59, I think. And I'll tell you how we're going to do things moving forward. But I'm excited to start looking towards next season, talking about next season. It's going to be an exciting season of football, I think. It's always an exciting season when it comes to college football. But I hope everyone has a tremendous Wednesday. And please do not forget to be great.